Welcome, Business, Bourbon, and Cigars listeners. And for those of you who might be watching, whether it's on meplusultra.com or YouTube, I'm your host, Scott Joseph. And today we're diving into a topic that is critical for success, literally in any organization. We're going to talk everything about trust. So I want you to think about that. That sounds simple, but we're going to dive into actually what makes this work and how you can build trust in the right way. And I'm really excited about our guest today. We're going to talk about exploring how high-performing teams use trust to build meaningful relationships. That can be with your clients, your internal and external, what leaders often get wrong about people and how they can fix it. So joining me today is Natalie Doyle Oldfield. She's an award-winning entrepreneur. She's an author. She's globally recognized thought leader when it comes to the topic of trust. Natalie works with business owners and leaders across all sectors, helping them adopt her 8 principles of trust so they can achieve incredible results. Her clients become some of the most trusted in their industries. She's an best-selling author of the book Trusted, The Proven Path to Customer Loyalty and Business Growth. If building trust, if building stronger teams, if increasing owner loyalty is important to you, this is the episode for you. And before we dive in, I want to make sure you subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Me Plus Ultra Network. That way you can get all the valuable content, never miss any future episodes, just like the one you're going to experience today. So let's get started. Natalie, welcome to Business, Bourbon, and Cigars.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. We were talking earlier, and when I saw the word trust and team building, it's what stood out to me the most. It's what got me so excited, why I wanted to have you on the show, because it doesn't matter how many hot seats we do with Me Plus Ultra, how many in our live business, bourbon, and cigar events. Doesn't matter what our challenges are, the issues or the barriers we're trying to break through. At some point when we're talking about solutions and action plans, building stronger teams, right? Building a stronger culture. It's like we can't get rid of those topics no matter what we try to do. And so they always come up. And so this hits right at the heart of it. So I just absolutely love it. So thank you.
It all comes down to trust. I know. It's at the heart of everything and the foundation of everything we do.
It is. So talk to me. Tell our audience, what led you to become an expert when it comes to trust and focus your career really on this essential product, on topic, I should say. What I want to know is, what were the key milestones?
Yeah. Okay. So I was working for a software company, and I was in a marketing role. For 25 years, I had different roles in IT companies, and I was always involved and curious about how customers buy and how people tick, and really always wanted to be involved in conversations that affected customers so we would have the best products. And so I had a lot of relationships with the customers, and my boss, the CEO, wanted me to take over the sales role. And I really didn't want to do that. I was quite hesitant because I know it's very accountable, and it's very different than marketing. Marketing is about generating leads and activities and creating the best product and supporting, but sales is, front line. Anyhow, all this to say, after several conversations, I decided, okay, I'll do it, because it was the right thing to do for the company. I was terrified because, looking back now, I didn't want to fail.
I love greater good people.
I mean, yeah, I really didn't want to fail, and I really was terrified. But you know what? I trusted my boss, and I just said, we'll see how it goes. So that was in August 2008, which was a long time ago. But for folks that remember that time, in September, the market crashed.
Yeah.
And we were selling software to the hospitality industry. So hotels stopped buying the, recurring licenses, and they put things on hold. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I had a team of people and I didn't know what to do. And I'd never sold anything. I really believe that people buy from people they know, like, and trust. I didn't know how to do sales. I had never taken a sales course. So I asked the people that were around me that were really successful in sales, that I thought were really successful in sales. And they all said to me the same thing, which was just focus on the customer, Natalie, focus on the customer. So we did that. And within a few months, the market started turning around and our sales did too. We just focused on the customer. So fast forward a year, I got so interested in how is it that some companies are so successful and how customers decide to buy and, what makes people tick, that I actually decided to go back to school as a grown-up. That's what I used to say to my profs, as a grown-up, because I was, same age or older than some of them, to answer this question. And what I found out made my arms get goosebumps, made my jaw drop. It all comes down to trust. Relationships are the lifeblood of all of our businesses, and companies that are trusted outperform other companies. And I got so excited about this that I built a framework that is based on science and evidence and the scientific method, and a proprietary playbook and framework so that people can learn how to do this. And fast forward, I started teaching people this repeatable system, because when things are built on the scientific method, it's repeatable and you get the same results, and tested it. And then I graduated in the middle of all this, continued to test out this over several years to create tools and a system and a measurement system and diagnostic for people to learn how to build, manage, and protect relationships of trust. And as you can imagine, I stopped working for that company and started my company, which is called Success Through Trust, over 10 years ago now, to teach people this repeatable system. Because what I found is that it was so exciting that when you have high trust, what I call high trust equity with your customers, you have all these amazing things happen. You have higher sales, you have more repeat business, you have referrals, all that good stuff. So that's how I got into it. And then I started writing books about it and articles, and working with companies all over the world to teach them this repeatable system to build trustworthy people.
I literally, before this show, just got off as a guest of a podcast.
Yes.
And you said something that really hit home, and we touched on it a little bit. And listening to clients, listening to customers, making it all about them. Because first off, I went into a story where that had happened, and it changed a little bit about our product, right? Because you're sitting there listening to the client feedback, and you're like, this is what's important to them.
Right.
And first off, and I'm assuming we're going to get down this road. I want to dig into this deeper. I'm assuming this helps build trust when you start actually acting on what they tell you, and they trust you more to do stuff. But,
yes.
But it also improves you talk, because you did this during your sales managing role, right? And so when that starts happening, you're doing it to improve the value proposition to your client. But at the same time, when you do that, when you improve value to your client, it works its way into your pitch, so to speak, because you recognize, wow, clients appreciate this. They like it more. I need to tell them up front that we do this. And I loved what you said, where you were looking for certain things by listening to clients that they did really well and that could be repeatable and stuff like that. I think that is just a huge key, and I wish all business leaders would pay attention to that. I want to dive into that later. But then you completely lost me, and my mind went racing when you said you went back to school, because I thought all I could think about is, man, I want to go back to school. That would be fun.
It was fun. And you know what? It was really fun because I got, I did graduate research to understand, like I said, why are some companies successful and others not? And, how is it that we decide to buy? And what I learned is intuitively, I knew that you buy when you know, like, and trust someone. I knew that intuitively, but I wanted to prove it out. And it was amazing because I did all this primary research looking at companies and then built this tool so that we can quantify the trust a customer has in us. And I call that trust equity. So I coined that term years ago to really have a term that is measurable. It's a key performance indicator for a lot of companies I work with. And it's something that all companies can be striving, is to build their trust equity. Because if you think about it, the more trust equity you have, the more trusted you are, the better results you're going to get, not only with your external customers, but, as you mentioned in the introduction, with your teams too. It also drives engagement. So, there's a very, very strong business case to become the most trusted. It's not just anecdotal that, we buy from people we trust. There's a really strong business case for it.
Well, let's talk about how does it, let's go to that, right?
Okay.
Most business leaders, right, if they're going to do this, they want the end result of what they feel like the trust will give, which at some point has to get to the bottom line. So let's talk specifically how it can directly impact that.
Well, when you have trust equity, imagine that, you're going to have a renovation done to your office. And you might do what I did. And that is, I asked my friends, I asked people in the community, okay, who did your renovations? What was it like to work with this company?
Yeah.
That referral, then I call you get the referral, then you call the company, and you have a comfort level that, oh, okay, well, my friend Lisa used this company, so I'm going to try them out. If I have a good experience, which I did when I renovated my office, then I go and tell someone else. That company is trusted. So here are the hard and facts. So that's just one story, but we all have lots of stories of companies that we trust. Mm-hmm. When you are a trusted company, you outperform the market 2.5 times. 80% of people worldwide buy from companies that they trust. We also pay more for companies when we trust. And we all know this, when we have a trusted advisor or a trusted provider that we deal with, we don't often ask for a quote or the price. Worldwide, 54% of people pay more.
Why do you think that is?
Because we have a faith or belief that the company is providing more value. They're going to act in our best interests, do the right thing for us. And so we pay more. I mean, just think about, I see you have a cup. I don't know if there's bourbon in there or coffee in there, but if there's coffee in there,
the bourbon's over here. The bourbon's back here, but there's coffee in this.
Okay, there's coffee. Okay, so let's just talk about coffee, right? There's lots of places that we can get coffee, right? You can make it in your home. You can go to your local coffee shop. You can go to the Dunkin' Donuts. You can go to Starbucks, the local Joe's, whatever it's called. In Canada, where I live, it's Tim Hortons, right? Yeah. There's Tim Hortons in the US too. Well, one of the most trusted coffee companies in the world is Starbucks, and they charge a premium.
Yeah. That's right.
So we do pay more when we trust. And 46% of people purchase more when they trust. So there's a wonderful business case to focus on trust. And it's not, I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago and he said, it's kind of squishy. It's pretty tangible. It's pretty tangible.
Well, you brought up something. No one's going to refer someone to a company they don't trust because they want the person they're referring to have a good experience, and they've got to trust that company is going to live up to their brand promise, right?
Yeah.
And so as a marketer, I've got a marketing agency. I'm not involved in operations, but fortunately I still own it. But we're always preaching about having multiple streams of referrals come in. Well, that only works. You can have all the processes to get referrals, having sales reps ask for them, having it on every communication, having different, marketing things that you might do trying to get them.
Yeah.
But none of it works if you don't live up to your brand promise. If your clients can't trust you. So that's the foundation of that. But the other thing, I'll tell you why I buy from companies I trust.
Okay.
Because if I don't trust them, same reason I would buy from, say, DoorDash, right? Convenience. I pay for convenience. By the way, if I don't trust a company to live up and do what they say they're going to do, I know down the road there's going to be a major inconvenience for me, and it's going to cost me time and effort, which I'm willing to pay more because I trust this company just to do it right the first time.
Yes.
Right?
There you go. So that's a great example of paying a premium.
Yeah.
Because we trust. There's sometimes, I work with companies and when they ask me about the business case. And so what we do is we say, okay, well, let's talk about some of the things you measure in your company. What some of the business problems you might have. And sometimes companies say to me, well, we have declining revenues, or, the revenues are soft. Or, maybe they say it takes a long time to convert a lead into a customer. The sales, the negotiations are stressful, or, we get leads, but they slip away. Or, here's one of my ones that I heard recently. Every quarter we're starting fresh. We're like zero. Like, it's like we have nothing in the pipeline.
Yeah.
We have challenges with retention. Those are all what I would call signals or indicators of low customer trust. So I know, Scott, people are not, waking up in the morning or Monday morning and Googling trust. In fact, my husband reminds me that all the time. People aren't Googling trust. No, I know that. However, it shows up on the top line and the bottom line.
Yeah. You have to know what to look for.
Yes. And it always comes down to trust. It's like you said in the introduction, it comes down to the culture. It comes down to the people. It comes down to trust. You can have the best product in the world with the most amount of patents, the best process, great workflow, great technology. But if you don't have the trust of your customers, they're not going to buy from you.
Well, I'm glad you touched on that because I wanted to get into how we measure it a little bit. But, let's get into specifics because it's not just, I think it shows up on the top and bottom line also, not from just a lack of trust or a lot of trust, depending on which direction you want to go, I guess, with your clients, but with your own teams. Because let's say, for instance, I've got to say, all right, you're back running your sales team, right?
Yeah.
Doing a great job. They're selling the heck out of stuff. But in the back of your mind, you don't trust that operations is going to be able to fulfill these things on time and or with high quality and mistake-free. That impacts your conviction, I would assume, and how you're selling.
100%. 100%, right?
Yeah.
You're not as confident.
Yeah. But I don't want to sell somebody something. And I'm like, if I do that, there's probably going to be a mistake here. Then I'm going to have to deal with that. It's
Mhm.
like,
It's true.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. Let's get specific on how do we build trust within our own teams?
Well, there's lots of ways. I guess I would start with, and I'm doing a session with a company next week on this, and it's all building trust within the team, because it's actually very similar to what you just described. It's a sales team, an account management team, and a team of sales support folks, which are like sales engineers and project managers who support the process, people who help with the proposals. And there's a disconnect there, and it's affecting the conviction. I love that word. It does. It affects the conviction and the confidence. And so we are going to focus on why we're all here.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to focus on. And so we always start with focusing on a culture that is customer focused.
Yeah.
And it's all about the customer. So all the companies I work with, they are very customer focused. They all want to start with the customer. And they know that trust is at the foundation of the customer experience. So we start with, okay, what's most important to the customer? Like,
I'm so glad you're saying this.
Okay.
Because when you're saying it, it's making me think, right? I think you've just nailed it. I think you literally have a mic drop moment here in this sense.
Okay.
Let's take the example we just talked about where sales doesn't trust operations.
Yeah.
It is impossible to be a client-facing a client-focused organization where you're all about the customer, the client, and have operational issues that impact the mentality of your sales team. If you were really focused on your clients, you would have such a strong focus on making sure your operational processes had a great client experience, were nobody's mistake free, but you know what I'm getting at. Always root causing issues. And so to me, you took an internal situation that I brought up and turned it right back to external focus, which you're right. That you're 100% right on that. As I listen to that, I'm like, yeah, if the best way to focus,
that's at the core. And so this workshop that we're doing, I call it the Trust Mastery Program with this company. It's not just the customer facing people that are going to be there.
Yeah.
It's going to be people in operations and from different parts of the organization, because when people get an appreciation for, why they're doing what they're doing and what's most important to the customer, it changes their whole mindset. I mean, some people are in my Trust Mastery Program, and honestly, it blows my mind the number of people that say, oh yeah, I never thought of that. They're a person just like us.
Yeah.
Or no wonder that stresses them out. That would stress me out too. Or no wonder this customer is overwhelmed. No wonder they need the data. No wonder we should really be delivering the product on time.
Yeah.
And the truth is we get desensitized, right? It's not that they came in thinking like that, but sometimes we don't think about the fact that we should be intentionally and deliberately thinking about the customer and building a relationship with a customer. So when I use the word trust and, companies that outperform, companies that are trusted are the ones that do the best. It's about the people. Make no mistake, right? Companies are made up of people. So everybody in the organization has a part to play in the customer's decision to trust that company. It's about everybody.
You're going into this company next week, you said, right? Next week?
Well, this is what I do all the time, but next week, yes.
Right. So, but this company you're going into, and I'm sure you've already done your homework and started preparing for them. But you've alluded to this earlier. You've got this 8-principle framework for trust, right?
Yes.
All right. So I'm a new company, just like the one you're going into, a new client, you're going in to help.
Yeah.
give me an overview of what you would come in and explain that 8 principle framework to me. Explain why it works.
Well, what I would do is I would ask them to assess their readiness first, right? I might ask them some questions first about, do they have untapped revenue potential? Does everybody know how to talk to customers? Is everybody confident sharing information with customers? Are people nervous to be in a customer meeting on their own? So I would do an assessment first, and then we would talk through how to build a relationship of trust. And we would start with, to get to the 8 principles, we would start with principle number 1. So principle number 1 is listen carefully with empathy and compassion, question and involve the other person in a conversation or a decision that affects them. And so that's where we would start. And we would walk through that and workshop that so that at the end of a session, whether it's a one-day session or they're in my Trust Mastery program, which is over several weeks, they know what empathy means. They're better listeners. They have the skills to connect with people and build mutual relationships.
Yeah. What talk to us a little bit, share a story or an example of how you've went into a company and transformed, whether it's the team or the company itself. I'm sure depending on the size of the organization, sometimes you might work with just a specific team, smaller, mid to small. I'm sure you might be working with the whole company. But talk to us, share an example of how you went in and literally, you don't have to give us all the details, but we only have so much time. But how did it transform this team or this company?
Okay. Sure. So I'm going to tell you the story of a technology company. The manager, who was the CTO of this team, Chief Technology Officer, came to me and said, I have a bit of an issue. I have folks on my team that are not building confidence in customers. And I said, well, how do you know that? And he said to me, well, I was at a senior leadership team meeting and I was told that customers are complaining about some folks on my team and that I need to fix it. And I know that I'm not that comfortable them going to a customer meeting without me. In fact, I'm terrified because I don't know what they're going to say. So I said, okay, anything else? He said, well, I would love it if people on my team and I could be part of, bringing in business and revenue to the company, because I really want to become an owner and I really want to stand out. So I said, okay. I met his team. Several of them went through his team of about 25 people that are all technical people. So, project managers, computer scientists, engineers, went into the Trust Mastery program. And I realized what was happening after I'd say day 2. And that was they did not have an appreciation for what was going on at the customer site. They didn't have empathy. So we go through a lot of different exercises and tools. And one of the things we did was we did a listening assessment and an exercise around listening. And at the end of the exercise, one of the folks said, wow, I didn't realize, when people are talking, I'm actually working on the next project. I'm working at the same time. I had no idea this was turning people off. I'm just trying to be efficient. Another person in the group said, geez, I didn't realize that me having my camera off was making people wonder what I was doing or if I was dressed. So there were several aha moments, which is what happens. So fast forward at the end of this program, within about 30 days, my client saw changes. But more importantly, one of the clients who was complaining said, I don't know what you've done with these people. It's like, it's like in golf when you go out and you play with the same 4 people every week, or the same 3 guys or gals in my case. And all of a sudden, like, they're driving it. In my case, if one of my girlfriends drives at 200 yards versus 100 yards, it's like, what the heck happened here? That's the same thing that happened. It's like, what happened? So not only did clients start to notice, but within 60 days, people on his team were bringing in business, Scott.
Yeah.
They were selling more to existing customers. So that's a real story of a company that transformed. And in my new book that you mentioned in the introduction, Trusted, The Proven Path to Customer Loyalty and Business Growth, there are 8 chapters. Each chapter has a principle, and each chapter starts with a story of a real client that I've worked with, what their challenge was, and what they did to improve it. And then at the end of each chapter, I have in the middle of each chapter, I have frameworks. And at the end of each chapter, Scott, there is a section that I call Making It Happen, so that you can put it into practice in your business.
The most important part.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all really tangible, practical things we can do if we intentionally focus on it.
You brought up something that made me chuckle, because I can remember back the old Scott. When I was involved in the day-to-day of stuff, and you're getting hit with it from every angle.
Yeah.
I remember people would come in, and I open door policy. So I thought that was good. That was my demonstration of listening. But when they'd come in and they'd go, all right, I'd be just like, give me this. Just give me, because, I need you to be direct and move on. And of course, that kind of made people feel like, so that has to be one of the mistakes. You've already brought it up. And, that goes with working while they're talking. All those things go into that one thing. I think it's easy for some people. Everyone learns differently. I think it's easy for some people to sit there and say, all right, tell me all the things I shouldn't be doing. What are the common mistakes? Because if I could just knock out a few of those, I instantly go up building trust. So what are some of the most common mistakes leaders make when it comes to building trust with their teams? So we can at least try to avoid a few of those, if not all of them.
The most common mistake I see, well, there's so many, but one of the most commons is not being sincere. So not being upfront, open, honest, not showing their true authentic self. At the end of the day, we all just want to see the real Scott or the real Natalie, right? We want to get to know that person. And the most common mistake I see is leaders putting like a shield on to be, perfect. And at the end of the day, if we really think about it, if someone's perfect all the time, we start to wonder, like, okay, when's a ball going to drop, right? I mean, none of us are perfect. So that would be one thing. The other thing that I would say, which is equally as common, is when leaders are not transparent. When they don't share everything that the other person needs to know. I'm not suggesting that a leader needs to share everything. However, if it affects another person, the more open and honest you are, the more you share, the more someone gets to know you. And when and if there is a doubt or there is something that comes up, a crisis, a mistake, an issue, the more someone knows you, the more forgiving they will be, and or the more supportive they'll be, Scott, right? Mm-hmm. So if you know that, as an example, I don't know what's a good example. If you know that your leader has been out of the office for the last 2 days, and they're late for a meeting on the Wednesday morning, you may not get so upset because you know that they're out at their son or daughter's graduation and they've been up really late the last few nights and they were traveling and maybe their flight came in late, versus not knowing where they were those 2 days and someone's just late.
Yeah.
So the more you share, the more vulnerable a leader is, the more open they are and authentic, the quicker you can build trust with someone.
Let me ask you this. How would you go about addressing a leader who might think soft skills, like trust building, exactly what you so this is something you probably deal with when you're selling your services and products, right? They just look at trust building as less important. It's not as important as the technical expertise they need to train on or the financial acumen, whatever the job might be, right? Selling skills, whatever it might be, even though trust obviously is a major part of selling. So sales is probably a bad example, but everything else. What do you say to them?
Well, it doesn't come up, to be quite honest, because the companies I work with, they want to be the most trusted. However, when and if it does come up, I guess what I would ask them is, like, who would you rather do business with? Someone that you trust or someone that you don't trust? I mean, the reality is, first we decide to trust, and this is a fact. First we decide to trust, then we decide on a company's capabilities. First we decide to trust, then we decide on a person's capabilities. And if you look at, like I said, if we go all the way back to one of your first questions, how did I get into this? I know that the higher trust equity you have, the more successful a company is. Yeah. It is the key driver and the indicator of future success, what your trust equity is. The more trust equity you have, the more successful you're going to be. And I guess I would bring it back to, again, if you can have the best product and the best technology or the best systems or the best location, but at the end of the day, if you don't have customers or employees or stakeholders or communities that trust you, they're not going to buy from you.
Yeah. Share with us some examples of how you've seen trust building strategies help, whether it's improve retention, because I know your book's about owner. So this can go in two directions, right? It can be client retention. It could also be employee retention.
Yes.
Yes. or morale. So I share some of that.
Well, so I have a story in my book about a very large manufacturing company, US-based, global company, US-based, that was having some of these indicators of low customer trust. And they also had very significant indicators of low employee trust. And those were lack of engagement, a lot of sick time, deadlines being missed. And we measured their customers' trust equity in them. So we got a trust equity score. Nice. And then what we did is we shared that information with all the employees, and we focused some guided discussions, which is what we called it. It's really professional development sessions, guided discussions, and training around how to rebuild trust with each other first and then with customers. Because it became a real issue that was, seeping out to the customer relationships, if you will. And it starts with the team on the inside and then builds its way out. And so that's a real story of a company that was not doing well. And we put together a whole initiative. We call it a Regain Trust Initiative. And within about 6 months, it took longer. It's a very large company, about 3,300 employees. So it took longer. And, it started with having the conversations, but within
trust not instant, right?
It's not. It's not. And it did take a little longer, but the customers started going back around and coming back around. They started increasing their sales, and people started getting more involved because, and it started at the top, Scott, to be honest. It started at the top with the leader saying, we need to focus on this. You're important. Trust is the key ingredient to a high performance team. And he knew that.
Yeah. I just go back to your customer facing. To me, the key is your employees.
Yes.
Employees trust more when the leader lives up to their brand promise.
Of course.
We're going to do this. We're going to improve our quality. We're going to improve our client experience. But if they never do anything, then you lose trust within your employees, and that just oozes out the customers. Not to mention your product and service isn't building trust at the same time. So it's just like this downward spiral of trust that creates a problem versus the opposite of what you're talking about.
Yeah. So trust starts at the top. It starts at the top with the leadership team. And you know what, Scott? It's a lot like having a culture of safety, right? When you are in a manufacturing environment or any type of environment where safety is important, it could be professional services, could be a marketing agency where psychological safety is really important.
Yeah.
And you have a culture of safety. You might have Toolbox Tuesdays or Toolbox Thursdays. You have a safety committee. When you focus on that, it cascades throughout the entire organization, and you have a safer culture. Trust is a lot like safety in a company. When a leadership team, the CEO, the owner, the GM focuses on having a culture of trust and is focused on doing the right thing for customers and acting in their best interests and doing the right things for employees and delivering on their promise and being trustworthy, again, it cascades throughout the entire organization, and they become more intentional and deliberate about it.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned now you're not allowed to say all of them. All right. So you have to pick one. You said earlier, and there's 8 chapters in your book, right? That you have a case study or story that you talk about with a client you've worked with.
I do.
All right. I need you to give us which one of those, in your opinion, you're going to hate to do this, I know, is the most, I'm like the biggest prospect in the world. Like I'm like your number one person you've got to convince to bring you on, and I need your help, right? What's the one story out of that book they've got to read or know about?
Well, so here's an answer you probably wouldn't like, okay? But I would say it depends, right? It depends on what's happening in your business. That's really the truth of what I would say.
It is the truth, but I'm not letting you do that.
Okay. So there are actually 9 stories because the introduction starts with a story too.
Yeah.
And which story?
Let's say this. You were a horrible salesperson. You learned nothing about me. You don't know what motivates me. Which is the story you're leading with out of that book?
I think I would lead with the last story.
Love it.
And the reason I would lead with the last story is it's a great example of an extremely successful company it's a manufacturing company that has a fantastic track record, a very small sales team, and their revenue was a bit flat. And everyone else in their industry, the revenue was going up. And they knew something was going on, but they didn't know what. And when the owner, I was just lucky. I sat beside a senior leader at lunch one day at a mastermind type event. And I was a guest there. And I sat beside this woman, and she said, I just wish everybody in the company cared as much about the customer as I do. And I wish everybody would be customer focused. And then she introduced me to the owners. And I would want everybody to hear this story if I was going to lead with one, because here's a company that they did measure the trust equity, and they had really strong trust equity. Their customers adored them. However, they only had a couple of people focused on the customer in the company, a couple of salespeople. And at the end, what we did is we did a series of workshops with a very large percentage of the people in the company, about 20%, in multiple roles: production, sales, executive assistants, project managers, supply chain managers, people in all different types of roles around how to build relationships of trust, and show them the systematic way. And I'm so proud of this client, because what they saw was that everybody does have a part to play in building relationships of trust. And then what happened, which was so exciting, is that a year later, they have so many opportunities, and their sales have gone up so much that they've had to invest in new capital equipment to fulfill all the orders. And they're trying to figure out, okay, which types of projects should we do? And so now they have, 20 odd people that are what I would call sales sensitive, bringing in business, because they all know that trust truly is the lifeblood of a business, and building relationships of trust. And it all started because they wanted to be the most trusted, and they really wanted to grow by having customer loyalty and having everybody focus on customers. So you made me choose, and that's the one. I love the first story too, about Chris, who's the CTO and the owner. And you know what? It's kind of an exciting story that just starts.
Well, I'm glad you led with that one. And the reason I say that is because, first off, in my opinion, it's much easier to grow, especially by percentage, a broken company versus one that's already cranking.
Oh, yeah, they're amazing. Yeah.
Bravo for them for recognizing, because when you're rolling, it's also easy to just be like, things are good. We don't want to disrupt anything, right? We don't want to change anything. What a great goal to
Yes.
be the most trusted.
Yes.
Imagine if that is your North Star for your company, to be the most trusted. All the things you would work on if that was truly a goal.
Those are my favorite companies to work with.
Yeah, outstanding. I love that. All right. So if someone's listening or watching us, right, and wants to begin building trust in their organization today, what's one simple, actionable step that they can take right now?
Start. Call one client. Connect with one client.
Yeah. And do what?
Ask them what's most important to them.
Yeah.
Understand what's their perspective.
And why. And why is it important to them, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing how sometimes we're afraid to ask that or make that call. It does so good. And what does that do for that one client too, by the way, when someone high up in the team's just calling them out of the blue, asking them that?
Yeah.
Well, Natalie, I got to tell you, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing what I think is incredible insights on trust and understanding its measurable impact on businesses. You've given our audience, I believe, a lot to think about, more importantly, to act on. And for our listeners or watchers, if you want to take your team or organization to the next level, I want you to visit Natalie's website. Now, I've got it here, but you might have an easier thing to say here. So, Natalie, tell us what's the best way to reach you from a website standpoint.
You can go to my website, which is successthroughtrust.com. Yep. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Natalie Doyle Oldfield, and you can find me on Amazon. That's where my book Trusted is, and that's another spot you can find me.
And we will have those links in our show descriptions. So if people go to meplusultra.com, and we'll have it very easy for them to access those links, click and go to. But if you don't want to wait till then, well, if you're hearing this, it's already up. So it's go do that, whatever's easiest for you. But also, if they go to your website, they can take advantage of you've got a free team trust assessment.
I do, correct? Yes.
All right, can you kind of talk to us just a little quick thing about that?
Well, it's a very short 2-minute assessment where you can identify the strengths and weaknesses on your team. And, it takes 2 minutes. It's like red, yellow, green to look at your readiness of your team, where you are, where the strengths are, where the gaps are, and where the opportunities are. And what I would add is if you fill this out and you want to have a chat about it, I'm very happy to set up a complimentary call to talk you through and give you some ideas of how to address either your strengths, like to strengthen it even more, or some gaps.
Well, everybody take advantage of that. Great tool to really help improve trust within your teams. You brought up bourbon earlier. Now we quickly got back to the coffee.
Yes.
But going to the trust thing. So I don't know if you know how much history you know about bourbon.
Not much.
Well, have you ever heard of bottled in bond? So there are bourbons now that are considered, they got the stamp on them, bottled in bond. And all of that came from legislation because way back in the day when people were making bourbon and people were putting whatever they could inside of it, disgusting ingredients to change the color, to make it look better than it was. And some of that was poisonous, and people got very ill. And so obviously the bourbon industry could not have a lack of trust. So they created the bottle and bond stamp and certification, I guess, so to speak. But all of that was built around trust. So you gave this great segue back into bourbon that aligns with the show. It's great.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we have to trust what's inside. And,
especially when we put it in our bodies. Yes.
Exactly.
So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And as always, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com. Visit Natalie's website, get that free assessment. Also, you could check out Me Plus Ultra Network on YouTube. Subscribe there as well for more episodes like this. Thank you for tuning in to Business Bourbon and Cigars. Until next time, take the lessons from today's episode, build trust, and make an impact. Thank you, everyone.